Welcome to Outside the Lines. I'm Bob Lee. Oklahoma, Joe Mixon, and context. On January 2nd, when the Sooners play Auburn in the Sugar Bowl, Mixon will be there. Not playing for Auburn that night, Javon Robinson, the young man slated last summer to be Auburn's starting running back, was dismissed from the team last August for an alleged domestic violence incident the month before. Mixon famously will be playing, though yesterday, Sooners coach Bob Stoops, after days of criticism, said that 2 years ago, after watching this tape, Mixon punching Mia Molitor, breaking 4 bones in her face, knocking her unconscious, that seeing this more than 2.5 years ago, Stoops and his boss, the AD Joe Castiglione, and school president David Boren, as a group, felt that a full 1-year suspension and separation from the team was fair and just.
What we, came up with discipline-wise, I feel at the time, 2.5 years ago, we felt was significant. And fault me if believing that an 18-year-old without prior violent situation whatsoever and an altercation had the wrong and horrible response that he did, that he might have an opportunity moving forward to redeem himself, improve from it, grow from it, and someday possibly be forgiven.
That was then. Standards have now changed. Scrutiny is dialed up, and Friday's release of the tape by Mixon's attorney totally changed the landscape.
I think 2.5 years ago, some viewed the tape locally and thought it was fair or appropriate, or to some degree it was, significant penalty and discipline. 2.5 years later, it's fair to say it isn't enough, and that's positive in that that's the way the things have gone in the last 2.5 years. That really the only thing that's ever acceptable anymore is dismissal.
It appears Stoops accepts that new reality, even if it runs against the deep bond that a coach feels with his players.
So again, if I'm at fault of something, it's hard to give up on these young men that I go in their homes and talk to their families and them about the opportunities to grow here at Oklahoma. And so again, for those who find that unacceptable, I apologize to those people.
Today, editorially crushing Oklahoma for their Mixon decision is a free shot for national media and opinion leaders. As Stoops said, the world is different. Here's what my friend and colleague Chris Fowler said back then, and Chris knows this landscape as well as anybody. College football was on a press conference call. I think nationally, he said, some of us were surprised by the length of the suspension. Not inappropriate necessarily, but surprised that the suspension was for the whole year. When you see a guy like Ravens running back Ray Rice is going to sit for 2 games for having assaulted a woman who is now his wife. Yes, Mixon's ban came 2 weeks after Ray Rice had been suspended in late July 14. Suspended initially for 2 games by NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Rice's suspension back then in the summer of 2014 was also generally seen as befitting the known facts. And this, at that time, was the only known videotape. It did not show Rice striking Janae Palmer. This was bad enough, surely, but no blow is shown. Go back to that time, back to late July 2014, and erase from your mental hard drive all that we've learned since then on domestic violence. Rice's 2-game ban and Mixon's 1-year suspension arguably made sense. And then in early September 2014, this. And all the rules and the perceptions and the norms changed. The so-called second Rice videotape, the blow that knocked Janae unconscious. We do not show this lightly. Beyond the trauma to this woman, certainly, Rice was given an indefinite suspension, and that initial 2-game suspension morphed into a massive cultural and gender blunder by the NFL. And Roger Goodell admitted this much. The ensuing crisis put the NFL under harsh scrutiny. It imperiled Goodell's leadership, and it led to massive changes in league policies and priorities, all of that through 2015. Now, most of the year 2016 has been spent reporting on Baylor University scandal because of a complete meltdown there, mishandling sexual assault allegations against athletes. So now Mixon in context and violence against women. Barry Trammell has been on this for the Oklahoman. 2 years ago, he was writing, quote, Joe Mixon's punishment is harsh, and I don't mean the season-long suspension. That's a small stigma to overcome compared to what Mixon faces for far beyond a solitary season. He's the guy who hit the girl. Mixon has begun a sentence that will take years to serve. Lindsay Schnell of Sports Illustrated is here. She wrote last week, addressing this to Bob Stoops a year ago. She said, "I wondered what your reaction would have been if Mixon's victim had been your daughter Mackenzie and not Molitor. I heard you were furious that I, quote, made it personal. Never mind the fact that Mixon's punch was personal to Molitor and her family," end quote. It is good to have you both here. Lindsay, Bob Stoops explains, I don't think he pleads, but he explains context. Does he make sense to you?
Well, first of all, Bob, I give Bob Stoops credit for speaking to the media yesterday. It would have been easy for him to hide till the Sugar Bowl. Does he make sense? Yes and no. Why couldn't he have set his own standard 2.5 years ago when he watched that video? I question if when Stoops says, you know, the climate has changed, does that mean he's changed? He understands the devastating effect that violence has against women? Or has this just become a PR nightmare for their university?
Barry, how's it going down, both the explanation yesterday and what has been bubbly since Friday when the counsel for Mixon released this tape?
Well, when you see the video, you know, the violence that we're talking about sort of comes to life. It's easy to read it on a piece of paper and picture it in your mind, but when you see the video, it is a stark reality for a lot of people. And you know, a lot of criticism of Bob Stoops and David Bourne and Joe Castiglione and the university. You've got your hardcores that, of course, just like touchdowns and want to move on with this. But clearly, this has been a stain on what had been a pretty good reputation over 17 years by Bob Stoops.
This media scrutiny on the university goes back actually to, I guess, September of 2014, Barry. You were part of that group of, what, a little bit more than 3 dozen people who were invited in and shown this tape. The tape was not released. What were the ground rules when this was shown to the media?
You couldn't take cell phones in. You couldn't record it in any way. You could take notes. Just about anybody, really, that showed up could get in. Any media was invited, and you know, you can argue that everybody's the media. A couple of what I would call non-traditional media did attend, but we had a big group that watched it, and it was a very sobering experience. Not a lot of banter, not a lot of jocularity from people that tend to act that way when we get together. So
and not a lot of calls in retrospect.
Was, fairly
it seems,
sobered up.
Not a lot of calls in retrospect. It seems for more than a year. That a year was not enough at that point. And these were, say, 3 dozen or more people of some sensitivity and intelligence. Yeah,
you know what? I'm not in the, you know, some people call this a red shirt year for Joe Mixon. I don't think it was a red shirt year. I think it was a heavy suspension. When you're as good a football player as Joe Mixon, to be told you don't get to play for a year, you don't get to be around the team, that's a heavy penalty. I'm not saying it was severe enough, but I am saying it was a severe penalty. So, you know, and as you pointed out, the landscape did change in the next couple of weeks with the Ray Rice situation. I mean, we're looking at the NFL knew substantially what Ray Rice did, gave him a 2-game suspension and a 6-game suspension, and eventually, when all the video was out, came the you know, just came the Ravens cutting him. So societal mores do change as time goes on, and I think you talked about Bob Stoops and coaches. Trevor talked about it. The Father Flanagan nature of football coaches. That's real, and that's hard for those guys to put aside. So.
Yeah, let's play that piece of sound from Trevor.
When I talk about Bob,
yeah, we're going to play that sound bite. We give Bob Stoops and Mattich is in his corner. Said this earlier today on SportsCenter. Let's listen.
Let me preface this by saying that as a boy, I saw my mother beaten and bruised, and so I'm sensitive to the subject. But I think college football coaches see things differently than the public sees it. Their first inclination when something like this happens, not something like Baylor, but something that they think the kid might be able to come back from, is how can I save this kid? Or more accurately, how can I put into place a pathway where he can save himself? First, because they pledge that to the parents of the recruits. And second of all, because the coach knows whether this is a kid that's kind of sketchy and this is just another expected thing, or if he's a good kid who made one mistake. And some of these kids go back to places where they don't have a chance. And so I truly believe that it is unfair to criticize Bob Stoops for trying to find a way to save this guy.
Rather thoughtful, Lindsay, thoughtful defense of Stoops. What would you say to Trev?
First of all, I think that things are redeemable. I believe Joe Mixon is redeemable. I also believe in second chances. But why does that second chance have to come at the highest level? Look at DeAndre Johnson at Florida State. Hit a woman. Jimbo Fisher boots him off the team. He goes to a junior college. He just signed a letter of intent to play at Florida Atlantic for new coach Lane Kiffin. Went on Good Morning America almost immediately afterward and was apologetic with his mom by his side. Talked about it doesn't matter what the woman did, if she put her hands on me, what she said. I should not have punched her. I haven't heard that from Joe Mixon. I agree that, you know, coaches think they can help guys, they can change guys, and I think that that's admirable. But I don't know that Joe Mixon has changed. He ripped up a parking ticket and threw it in an attendant's face. You know, if you read the police report, it sounds really like he was trying to intimidate her. Is he a different man than when he punched someone 2.5 years ago? I don't know. And that's what I wrote this week, is that I think OU is failing Joe Mixon. I do not think that they are concerned with actually making him a better person. They also have not been transparent about the requirements for him to stay on the team. Besides run fast and score touchdowns, I don't know what they expect of Mixon.
Well, right now he will be in the starting lineup in the Sugar Bowl at Auburn. Thank you so much both for being here. Barry Trummel and Lindsay Schnell wish you a Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us outside the lines. Thank you. This update from Raleigh.